have a lot to talk about today because there are so many bats around the world. There is more than 1,200 different species of bats. So last week we talked about narwhals. That's just one species, and we're able to have so many facts. But today we're going to be doing a little bit more general about what makes a bat a bat. Yeah, a little more about them all around the world. So I see that there are tons of different people here, which is so cool, from lots of different countries. We have Canada and Ireland and England, which is so great. Hi, everyone. Now, everywhere that you live has bats, which is really, really neat. Bats live on every continent in the whole world other than Antarctica. So they live as north as the Arctic and as south as Argentina. And that's really cool because it means this one animal can really live in all these different environments, all these different ecosystems. So what makes a bat a bat? A bat is not a bird and it's not a bug. It's actually a mammal. And so it's a mammal, which means it drinks milk from its mom. Later on, I'm going to show you some pictures of a bunch of different types of bats, which will be a lot of fun. But we will talk about a little more about bats first, and then I'll show you the pictures so you can kind of know what you are looking at. Now, they're the only mammals that can actually fly. I know that we call flying squirrels flying, but they actually glide from tree to tree. And there are some other animals that glide, but bats are the only ones that can flap their wings, which is actually really interesting because when you look at a bird flying, they flap their whole arms up and down. And when you see a bat flying, sort of seems like it's the same, but it's not, because a bat wing is actually their hand. They have really tiny forearms, and then the whole wing is just an elongated hand that has skin over it. So when you look at, and I'll show you a picture so this makes sense, but when you look at a bat, the very top, they have a little claw, that's actually their thumb, and then the rest of the skin gets pulled all the way around their hands. And so remember last week we had a narwhal dance and we were all dancing like narwhals? Well, we can dance like bats because we can have really short forearms and we can flap our hands. And that's a bat dance. Everyone can, well, some of us will. I'll dance by myself, it's fine. But it's pretty neat to see when you look at a bat up close, or if you later on look at a video of them flying, you can see that it's their hands that are doing all of the work, which is a pretty cool adaptation. Now, like I said, there are lots of different bats around the world. There are two groups of bats. There's microbats and megabats. So microbats are what we have in all of our environments. They're pretty little, micro. And then there's also megabats, that the very biggest bat in the whole world is actually called the Livingstone's flying fox. Relevant to me, it's my last name. Their wingspan can be 6 feet long. So they are huge, but don't worry, they are called flying foxes or fruit bats because they look like foxes. They're very cute. I'll show you pictures. But they also only eat fruit. So it's kind of like a neat thing for them. Now, the littlest, I'll tell you the littlest animal as well, littlest bat, is the Indonesian bumblebee bat. And they actually have the smallest skull in the mammal kingdom, and they are as small as your thumb. So bats can be as small as your thumb, and their wingspan can be as tall as me. Well, a little bit taller than me. Now, a lot of people wanted to know how bats pee and poo because they spend a lot of time upside down. So do they pee and poo on themselves? And I also had this question because I thought bats were really neat and I thought maybe they're very dirty, but they're not. So I have a little necklace here, which is actually going to explain to you how they pee and poo. So this is how bats normally are upside down. They, so their hands are their wings, but they have quite big feet that have a really good grip. They're really, really strong. And so they hang upside down. They do a lot of eating upside down. They sleep. They talk with their friends. When they're not flying, they're upside down. So if you're upside down all the time, how do you poo? Well, what you do is you have your little thumb, like we said, there's sometimes a little claw on it, and you take your thumb out and you hold it up. So you do a little push up and you go upside down for a bat, right side up for us, you pee, you poo, and then you flip over again. So you kind of do like a handstand to make sure that the business direction is facing down, and then you can whoop, go back again. So it's a really good question, because to be honest, before someone asked it, I thought, I actually don't know about that. So bats live in colonies. A group of bats is just a colony, and they live, all their homes are called roosts. A lot of people also wanted to know, like, what does a bat house look like? Where would they live? And it depends on the bats, but the three things they always look for is they want it to be safe, they want it to be warm, and they want it to be dry. And so bats, unlike mice or rabbits or even bears, who all make their own houses, bats don't. They don't really, their hands are busy flapping and bat dancing. So they don't make their own homes, but they find little crevices in caves or between the bark in a tree or a hole in a tree, and that's where they live. And they live in colonies, sometimes of thousands of bats, so they can all be together and they can all be warm and safe and dry. Now, roosts are so interesting around the world because they do look very different. Little microbats will live on the insides of trees, or you can make a bat box, which is just like a really, it looks like a birdhouse, but instead of having a lot of room for a bird, it's just quite small. And they can snoop in because they're very little, and then they all hug each other and are warm. But then if you're looking at a flying fox, they actually don't live in caves or live in small houses. They just live in trees. They just hang on to the bough of a tree, and you will end up seeing huge colonies just in a big old fruit tree. And that's just where they live, and they chat with each other, which is pretty neat. Now all of these are very amazing facts, but roosts change throughout the year. So bats in the winter actually they don't migrate. They go from one roost to another, but there's not a huge amount that go down south of the winter or anything like that, like we see with some migratory birds. Where they go is they find just a place that's going to be safer and drier and warmer. So if they live between the bark in a tree, they'll go deeper inside the tree if there's a hole, or they'll go deeper in a cave and things like that. Now, because they hibernate for the winter, they go to sleep, the roosts that they hibernate in are called hibernacula. But if you say it in a Dracula voice, hibernacula, sounds a lot better. And you can always remember that they live in hibernacula. Because everyone is muted, I can think you're all laughing and think that's very good. Now, interesting, for in the UK and Ireland, the bats that are most common are pipistrelles, and we actually don't know where, oh, hi! We actually don't know where those bats live in the winter. We know they go somewhere to hibernate, but we don't know where they go, because we know that there are so many around. We just go, I'm not sure. So just like narwhals, there was a lot of information that we don't really know about them. Bats are the same way, which I think is so cool. It means if all of you are interested in bats and you want to study them, there's lots we don't know about them. And there's lots of questions you can ask and ways you can be really curious about bats, which is pretty cool. Like I said before, bats are mammals. They drink milk from their mom. Most bats, depending on the species, are pregnant for like 6 to 9 weeks, and then they have their babies on them for about 5 weeks, drinking their milk. So the babies will cling on to their mums, and their mums flap around and fly and hunt and get all kinds of food, and the babies just hang on to them and learn how to fly and see how that feels, which is also pretty cool. Now, baby bats are called pups, making them even cuter, little puppies. And bats, lots of people wanted to know what bats eat. Bats eat tons of different things, depending on how big they are, where they live, everything in between. So there are some bats in North America called big brown bats, and they're called big, but they're, you know, bigger than an Indonesian bumblebee bat. They eat mosquitoes, which is great. There are some vampire bats. There's only 3 vampire bats in the whole world. You know, a lot of people think because of Dracula and because of basically Dracula and vampires, all bats drink blood. Only 3 of them. They only live in Central and South America. And they are actually so gentle when they drink blood. Most animals don't even wake up. They don't suck blood like we think, looking at vampires. What they do is they bite really gently an animal, and then they lick some of the blood up. So it's a little bit different than how Dracula would portray it. Now there's other bats that are fruit bats that eat just straight up fruit. They just chow down on things like mangoes and figs, and they're really, really important for ecosystems. All bats are, but they're really important because when they poo, they actually poo some of the seeds out of the fruit they're eating. So what do we know about poo? It's manure. So when an animal poos out a seed, it's an actual perfect little soon-to-be plant. So this is a great thing to have animals do, because it means we don't have to plant tons and tons of trees. All the trees that we plant are excellent, but then we get a hand with planting trees just by fruit bats, which is neat. There's also some bats that are really good for pollination of different species. So there's a Pallas long-tongued bat, and they kind of act like hummingbirds, that they go from one flower to another, drinking nectar, just like a hummingbird would, and all the pollen gets on their face. And so they pollinate lots of different flowers as they go, which is pretty neat. Now, thinking about bats that eat insects, most bats, the ones that eat mosquitoes, can eat around 1,300 mosquitoes a night, which is awesome. So I think we should all have bat houses around our house, because if we have tons of bat houses and we have tons of bats, we won't have a lot of mosquitoes. There's also a lot of farmers throughout the world that put bat houses out, because then the farmers don't have to use pesticides. Because if they have tons of bats, the bats will eat beetles and moths and all other pests that are eating their crops, which is pretty cool. Let me just see. Now, the fossil record does show that bats have been around between 65 and 100 million years. So they came around the same time as dinosaurs. And that is why we see so many bats throughout the world, which is amazing. And that's why they're so adaptive to where they are. They are big and small and eat this and eat that, because they've just been here for a really long time and have figured out how to do it. Now, another really amazing thing that makes bats bats is echolocation. And this is how bats know what is in front of them. So some of you might have heard before that people are, or so you might have heard blind as a bat, or bats are blind. They actually aren't. They have pretty good eyesight, but they're nocturnal, which means they hunt at night and it's really dark. So, and some of them live in caves, they live in really dark tree holes and things like that. So they don't actually need to see anything. So what they do is they use echolocation. So when you look at a bat, you can see they have, most of them have really big ears. Someone asked about bats specific to Vancouver Island, and we have something called a Townsend big ear bat, and you should look that up because they have the biggest ears. They look like rabbits. It's real cute. But so echolocation is really neat. What they do, so if they yell and they don't hear anything, they know that there's nothing in front of them. And if they yell and something comes back, they know, oh, there's something in front of me. But they're yelling so much, they're able to make trace a picture of what's in front of them. And they can see something as small as a human hair when they are yelling and hearing what echoes are coming back in the world. And so some people do worry that a bat will fly in their hair. Oh, I see a narwhal in your bat cave. So cool. So some people do worry that bats will get caught in their hair. They won't. If bats can echolocate a tiny moth or a tiny mosquito and they can hunt that at night, they are gonna see all of this with echolocation. So let me share my screen and show you some pictures of bats. So this is a super great picture of a bat. You can see its little feet in the back. It's really good grabby feet because they have to hold on for a really long time when they're living in caves or trees or anything like that. You can see how big their ears are, and you can see their thumb right at the top of their wing, or their hand. This is a bat in Cuba, and it is, and you can see the one behind it as well. And so also think if bats can fly really, really quick through a bat cave like this, their echolocation skills are top notch. Now here's another really great picture. This is another picture of a bat survey that we did in Cuba. This is a volunteer who looks very cool, and here's a bat that also looks very cool. So this picture is so great because you can see how big the bat's ears are. So when they're echolocating, when they're listening for an echo for things, you can see how big these big ears are to hear things. You're also able to see how their wings are actually their hands. And they're looking at the camera, which is really nice. And you can see the back foot, just how big those toes are and how they're really good at grabbing. Here are some close-ups of some little babies. So you can see all bats look super different, which is so neat. This is the thumb. The top picture is a really good picture of the bat's thumb. And so remember when I said that's how bats pee and poo? That little thumb will hold them up so they can turn upside down, right side up, whatever way you want to be, so they can not get a mucky bum, which is important. No one wants a mucky bum. And then the bats on the bottom here are bats that live in a leaf in Costa Rica. And so, it's warm in Costa Rica, but it's quite wet. So these bats, in order to be dry and safe and warm, all they have to do is live in between some branches and some leaves and trees, which is pretty cool, pretty beautiful. Oh dear. Thanks, Carol. And so the hat on the top, you can see is covered in pollen. And so you can see how they're such good pollinators. And you can also see how big their amazing ears are to hear everything in front of them. And then you can just see on all of them, you can see the thumbs of all these bat wings that are at the very top of their wings. That helps them sometimes walk when they need to, sometimes, go to the bathroom, hang out with their friends. But you can see all of these bats are from Cuba, and all of them are super different based on what they eat, where they live, and everything in between. Now, these are flying foxes. So this is a spectacled flying fox, 2 of them. They live in Australia. And so again, you can see how big their ears are. They do love chatting with each other. Echolocation is important for them for flying and they do chat back and forth. Like all animals, they have communication, but they don't need to echolocate to hunt, because as you can see from this little guy eating some watermelon, he's going to see where the watermelon is and it's not going anywhere. So these bats are super important for tropical forests because they eat all these all these fruits that have seeds in them, and then when they poo, the seeds are planted with some manure and they go on their way. They're so cute. They love nectar and they love sweet things. Now, the one on the one that's holding the watermelon, you can see that it has quite a big thumb. And so that's another really cool adaptation that it has to really hold on to the fruit that it's eating very adorably. And then here is a little baby, a little pup. And so what happens when there are orphaned flying foxes or things like that, it's important for them to hug something while their body is developing. And so when rehabilitators have them and help them out, they get little pillows to hug, which is fairly adorable, I think. So just having a little nap after a bottle. So those are my slides that quickly just show you all kinds of different bats. And I think it's so interesting to see how, you know, it's one type of animal, it's a bat, but there are so many different ways that it can look, which is pretty neat. Now, some people did want to know about bat diseases and things like that. The easiest way to not get sick is what we're doing right now, is don't put bats in your mouth and don't touch them, and just wash your hands a whole bunch. If you see a dead bat or anything like that, don't touch it. Definitely don't put it in your mouth. Tell a grown-up, and if you are a grown-up, then talk to SPCAs or you know, local government that does animal cleanup, and they'll be able to get the, or veterinarians, they'll be able to get the bat and make sure that it's okay. But because bats, you know, are hanging out in trees, hanging out, doing their own thing, not getting stuck in your hair, it's really easy to not get sick by a bat. You just don't put it in your mouth. It's easy. And of course, wash your hands like you normally do. So that is so much about bats. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, I see like a couple hands. What's your question?
When we looked at the bats pictures, and they look really funny if you turn them upside down.
They do. If you see pictures of bats that are like walking, if you flip it upside down, it looks like they're dancing. It's very cute.
How can hands make them fly?
So what has happened is they have been on Earth for so long that they realized that their hands should have a lot of skin. So those pictures that we saw, that you can see that they're wings, it is a wing, but when we see a bird, it's their whole arm that's covered in feathers, and that's what helps them fly. But the bats, when they were becoming bats, they didn't need to have a whole arm. They just have a big hand that got bigger and bigger and bigger. So when you see a bat wing, it's much bigger than my hand. Like the fingers that come out are really long. So if you think about a flying fox, something that has like a 6-foot wingspan, that's like a person. So their hands are as big as a person with all kinds of skin on it. So they're able to flap that, I'll be in the camera. They're able to flap that much. So you just have to take a look at how big the whole wing is.
You know, bats, do they have any predators, like animals that eat them?
Oh, that is such a good question, because I was supposed to say that and I totally forgot. So thank you. Yeah, so there's quite a few things that would eat bats. Unfortunately, bats that get eaten in urban settings where most of us live are eaten a lot by cats. So when people let their cats outside, cats are super good ninja hunters, and they are able to, they're also fairly nocturnal and like to hunt at night. So they are able to see that there are bats around, and they eat them. So unfortunately, cats eat a lot of them, but also things like foxes in your area can eat bats. In the roosts, different raccoons or opossums over in North America can eat them. Any type of, any animal that likes meat will, you know, try to eat a bat. The good thing when bats are flying is they're really hard to catch because they are so good at maneuvering, and echolocation makes them like flying ninjas. Everything's a ninja in its own way. So they're really good at flying away. It's the problem if they are, if they're sleeping or if they're on the ground pollinating or things like that. So we want to make sure we have lots of safe areas for bats to live. One big problem is not that they're getting eaten, but they don't have as much habitat as they had. So if they live in trees and old growth forest and things like that, especially on Vancouver Island, we want to make sure we have lots of old growth forests so they can live there. Good question. Thank you for reminding me.
So is white nose disease still a problem?
Yeah, so white nose disease is still a problem. So that is a fungus that bats can get on their noses. It doesn't transfer to humans or anything like that, but how they get it is when bats go into hibernation, they don't move at all. It's hibernation. They cling on, they go to sleep for a couple months. And so that is when, oh my goodness, you have a bat and you're upside down. Followed the brief, it's great. So white nose syndrome fungus gets over their noses and in their respiratory systems while they're sleeping. And so it is a problem, but there are lots and lots of researchers right now that are researching solutions and way to help them. So it's just like all viruses and all stuff out there, we have scientists doing really great work. So science helping. I see that Daniel wants to know why some bats are black. Now, remember, the things that all bats like is they want to be warm, safe, and dry. And so a lot of them are black because they are super secret ninjas and fly at night and don't want to see them, but they also want to be really warm during the day. So to absorb the most amount of warmth possible, they want to be black, just like my very warm sweater. And then at night, they can like around and the moths don't see them while they're hunting them. It's a good question.
Let's do one more question.
Where do bats migrate to?
Yeah, so that is a great question because they do move their roosts, so their houses. They'll move them a few different times during the year, but they never move very far. So they have just regular roosts that they live in, and then they will have maternity roosts when a bunch of bats are pregnant and all need to feel very safe and very warm, and then they have hibernation roosts. So they never migrate as much as we see migratory birds that go, from the Arctic to Argentina. They just go around their neighborhood and just get like safer and warmer and warmer and safer depending on the season. Good question.
Why? But then why are some bats called brown bats?
Yeah, that's a good question too. So they are called brown bats because they are brown. Sometimes when we name bats, we are not very imaginative. That's why we have big brown bats and little brown bats. They're totally different bats. But the same thing, they're dark brown because they want to be as warm as possible. And they're brown so they can also camouflage in the trees that they live in. So you can't really see them because they're sleeping all day. Good question though.